Here is Section 1, under 1,000 words, written exactly according to your instructions. Clear, focused, mail-only cast, advancing plot, no headings. Cadet Orion Hale stood at the observation window of the Galactic Defense Academy's Outer Rim station, studying the star that pulsed with a faint, unnatural rhythm. The blue giant should have burned steadily, but tonight its surface flickered, as if something enormous brushed against its light and slipped away before any sensor could register the touch. Orion leaned closer, narrowing his eyes, trying to piece together a pattern he had noticed for weeks. It was subtle, almost shy, but persistent enough that a mind like his refused to dismiss it as cosmic coincidence. Behind him, Commander Vare approached with the heavy footfalls of someone accustomed to authority. The alien's scaled features remained rigid, carved from years of combat tradition. "Cadet Hale," he said, his voice low, "I expect you to be preparing for tomorrow's simulation, not daydreaming about dying stars." Orion didn't look away from the window. "With respect, sir, the star isn't dying. Something is interfering with it. Something intelligent." Commander Vare exhaled sharply, the sound reminiscent of metal being scraped. "You humans are always imagining threats where none exist. A weakness of your species, untamed creativity without constraint." Orion allowed himself a small, humorless smile, or a strength, depending on the situation. Before Vare could reprimand him, the entrance doors parted and Cadet Threx marched in, posture stiff, mandibles twitching in irritation. Threx never wasted time acknowledging Orion. To him, humans were an evolutionary joke, a species forced into interstellar society by their stubborn refusal to remain irrelevant. "Commander," Threx said, ignoring Orion entirely, the gravwave array detected another pulse. 8% stronger than the previous one. Vare's golden eyes tightened. "Show me." Threx handed him a datapad. Vare scanned the information, and his expression shifted ever so slightly. Not fear. Vare had no room for such a thing, but concern. Orion caught it, a momentary crack in the commander's perfected demeanor. Something was wrong, and they all knew it. Orion stepped forward. "Sir, that amplitude increase isn't natural. Pulses don't grow in strength unless something is approaching the star." Threx scoffed. "Your assumptions are based on human instinct, not science." Orion turned toward him. "Instinct is just fast pattern recognition. And right now, the pattern is screaming." Commander Vare raised a hand, silencing them both. "Enough. Hale, explain your theory." That was new. Vare rarely invited Orion's analysis, but the situation had clearly shifted beyond maintaining alien pride. Orion brought up the last month's data from memory, describing the oscillation intervals, the harmonic distortions, and the faint gravitational residue left after each pulse. Every detail pointed to a singular conclusion: something immense was moving toward their system, but in a way that defied known physics. It was not a ship, a meteor, or a collapsing star fragment. It behaved like a creature, yet beyond the definition of biological form. When he finished, Vare remained silent for several seconds. Threx broke the pause with a dismissive click. "It is speculation. Nothing more." But before the commander could respond, the Academy's emergency alarms erupted, drenching the observation deck in red light. A holographic display ignited above them, projecting a message from the Galactic Council. Their emblem, 12 interlocking spirals, glowed with unusual urgency. A synthesized voice resonated throughout the station. "Attention, all academies. A cosmic anomaly designated Nullform Leviathan has entered Council space. Standard containment and weaponry have proven ineffective. Evacuation protocols are advised. Repeat, no weapon can stop it." Orion felt his chest tighten. The Leviathan. A name chosen not for biology, but for scale. A phenomenon described in fragments across ancient interstellar records, always associated with sudden planetary collapses and unexplained mass disappearances. Many believed it myth. Others hoped it was. Commander Vare stared at the hologram, his usual composure hardened into iron. "No weapon can stop it," he repeated quietly, almost to himself. "That is a declaration of surrender." Threx's mandibles twitched with fear he tried to hide. We must evacuate. The Council's order is absolute. Orion, however, shook his head. There's something they're not seeing. The pulses we detected, they weren't aimless. They were probing, searching. Patterns like that means structure, and structure means vulnerability. Vare turned sharply. Cadet Hale, you are not authorized to challenge a galactic decree. I'm not challenging it, Orion replied. I'm refusing to die because someone else gave up. Threx hissed in disbelief. Typical human arrogance. Or typical human problem-solving, Orion countered. We don't stop because someone says something can't be stopped. The alarms intensified as a new hologram appeared, an image captured from a distant cruiser. A silhouette of impossible scale drifted between stars, a shimmering distortion like a shadow cast by gravity itself. It pulsed once, and an entire asteroid belt collapsed inward, vanishing in an instant. Vare stared at the image with rare solemnity. It consumes existence. How do you propose we fight that? Orion didn't answer immediately. His gaze moved to the far end of the deck, where a sealed crate sat beneath 3 layers of hazard markings. A prototype weapon. Restricted. Unstable. Officially abandoned. He felt something shift inside him. Not fear, but certainty. Humanity had survived by refusing to obey impossible limits. And he was still human, even here among species older and wiser. He stepped toward the crate. Orion, Vare warned. What are you doing? The cadet placed a hand on the cold metal surface and met the commander's eyes. If no weapon can stop it, he said quietly, then I'll just have to prove them wrong. And as the station trembled from a distant pulse, Orion Hale made his decision. He wasn't evacuating, and he wasn't surrendering. He was going to fight an entity the universe itself feared, and he intended to win. If you want, I can now write Section 2 exactly the same way. Here's Section 2 under 1,000 words, continuing directly from Section 1 with the same HFY, male-only, sci-fi tone. The docking bay was a frenzy of controlled chaos. Evacuation shuttles launched in carefully timed intervals, while officers barked orders into comm channels and cadets scrambled to secure equipment. Orion moved through the turmoil with singular focus, ignoring the anxious whispers that followed him like shadows. He didn't run. He didn't hesitate. His destination was the restricted engineering archives, a place most cadets were forbidden to enter without explicit authorization, and the only place he might find the key to challenging an entity the universe claimed could not be stopped. Commander Vare followed at a measured pace, his scaled features carved into an unreadable mask. He did not speak, but Orion felt the weight of the commander's gaze on him, like a predator observing prey with reluctant respect. Despite weeks of training under Vare, Orion knew the alien's patience had limits, and that patience was thinning by the pulse. When they arrived at the archives, Orion keyed in a sequence learned from months of late-night observation. The door hissed open, revealing shelves of data spheres suspended in zero-gravity racks, each containing years of experimental records, some centuries old. Orion floated among them, fingers brushing the cold metal, scanning for anything marked classified, cosmic threat, or nullform containment protocols. Most spheres contained only failed weapon designs, data on gravitational anomalies, and simulations that ended in catastrophic failure. His heart sank slightly at the familiar pattern of human arrogance ignored by alien pragmatism. Then he found it. A small, worn cylinder, older than the Academy itself, marked with the faded insignia of early Terran experimental projects. Orion's pulse quickened as he activated the sphere. A holographic figure sprang to life, human, wild-eyed, and frantic. If you are seeing this message, it means the nullform is approaching faster than expected, the projection said. All conventional armaments accelerate its adaptation. The Leviathan cannot be killed by force. The only potential lies in the resonance core, an unstable device designed to synchronize with human neural patterns. Only a mind capable of true chaos can pilot it. Attempt with caution. Failure equals total annihilation. Orion exhaled slowly, absorbing the words. The resonance core. Not a weapon in the conventional sense. A device that amplified human intuition and emotional energy into something tangible, something that could disrupt the Leviathan structure without attacking it directly. It was dangerous, untested, and almost certainly illegal, but it offered a glimmer of hope where none existed. A sudden movement behind him made him freeze. Commander Vare stepped into the holographic glow, arms crossed, voice calm, but edged with steel. "I should have known you would come here," he said. "I have no choice," Orion replied, not turning. "This is the only way." "You are aware of what you propose," Vare said slowly. "The core is unstable. Previous pilots were incinerated, their consciousness overwritten by feedback. This is not a weapon, it is a crucible." Orion turned, his gaze unwavering. "Then it's exactly what we need. Nothing else works. We've tried everything else, and the Council has already surrendered." Vare's eyes narrowed. "You are a cadet, not a savior." "I am a human," Orion said simply. "And humans survive by refusing to accept limits." For a heartbeat, Vare said nothing. Then he stepped closer, the alien equivalent of a warning. "You risk your life not because of logic, but because of stubbornness. And yet, I cannot deny that logic alone will not save us." Orion allowed himself a brief flicker of hope. "Then help me." Together, they pored over the ancient schematics. The core required neural interfacing, precise harmonic calibration, and energy conduits that could not exist in standard systems. Human minds, Vare confirmed, were the only minds capable of generating the range of chaotic resonance required. Alien intellects were too precise, too orderly. Even the most creative species could not generate the unpredictable spikes necessary to disrupt the Leviathan. Orion's stubborn confidence was exactly the element missing from conventional simulations. Hours passed as they scavenged components, modified an aging interceptor craft, and rewired energy conduits. Outside, alarms blared, evacuation shuttles launched, and the Leviathan's distant pulses shook the station like seismic waves. Each tremor reminded Orion that the entity was approaching faster than predicted, relentless and indifferent. Finally, the prototype stood complete, a small, sleek interceptor cradling the resonance core. The sphere pulsed faintly, synchronized with Orion's heartbeat, as if aware of the mind it had chosen. Commander Vare inspected the final assembly, his expression unreadable. "It resonates with you already," he murmured. "Your mind, chaotic, reckless, human, makes this device viable. No other species could do what you are about to attempt." Orion nodded, swallowing the tension building in his chest. "I won't fail. Not when everything depends on it." The hangar doors shook violently as a pulse reverberated through the station, closer now, unmistakable. The Leviathan had entered the system perimeter. Every cadet, officer, and shuttle operator froze, feeling the unrelenting pull of something that defied comprehension. A voice crackled over comms. Admiral Vorin, voice sharp with disbelief and barely concealed fear. "Cadet Hale, is that what I think it is? The core? You're planning to confront it?" "Yes, sir," Orion replied. "No weapon can stop it. But maybe a human can." Silence followed. Then the Admiral's voice softened, almost begrudgingly. "God help you, and all of us." Orion stepped into the cockpit, secured the harness, and felt the resonance core hum against his chest, syncing with his pulse. Commander Vare placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Cadet, this is not a weapon. You are projecting yourself. Your mind is the mechanism. Stay human, stay unpredictable." Orion inhaled, eyes fixed on the open hangar doors and the shadow beyond, the Leviathan looming like a dark tide across the stars. "I've never been anything else," he whispered. As the interceptor thrusters ignited, propelling him toward the void, the station trembled beneath the approach of something unstoppable. And for the first time, Orion felt a surge of exhilaration rather than fear. This was the moment humans were made for, the impossible challenge, the defiance of inevitability. And he was ready. "If you want, I can now continue with Section 3, taking Orion directly into the battle with the Leviathan. Here's Section 3, under 1,000 words, continuing from Sections 1 and 2, keeping the HFY, male-only, sci-fi tone intact. The void stretched before Orion Hale like a canvas of infinite darkness, broken only by the faint shimmer of distant stars. The Leviathan loomed ahead, a living distortion that bent space itself, its form impossible to define. It pulsed, not like a heartbeat, but like the slow, deliberate rhythm of a force older than galaxies. Orion gripped the controls, the resonance core thrumming against his chest, translating the chaotic energy of his mind into a tangible current of power. Every instinct told him the entity could annihilate him in an instant. Every instinct also told him that hesitation would be fatal, not just for him, but for every life in the sector. The first pulse from the Leviathan slammed through the interceptor, shivering the hull and sending warning lights flaring. Orion's hands flew over the console, feeding counterharmonics into the core. The resonance pulsed in tandem with his heartbeat, creating a subtle feedback loop that pushed against the Leviathan's distortions. The creature paused. It recoiled, not in fear, but in curiosity. It had not encountered a pattern it could not absorb, a mind it could not predict. Orion smiled grimly. Humans were chaos incarnate, and he was about to weaponize it. Cadet Hale, the interference is exceeding safe thresholds. Commander Vare's voice came over comms, sharp but controlled. You risk neural overload. The core will burn your mind if you do not stabilize the output. Orion pressed a sequence into the interface, recalibrating harmonics. I know, sir. That's the point. The Leviathan adapts to conventional logic. I am going to be illogical. He toggled the core to manual resonance, allowing his emotions, fear, fury, hope, to surge freely into the energy field. The cockpit glowed as the core amplified his inner chaos into an oscillating pulse that warped the space around him. A tendril of the Leviathan arched toward him, a filament of dark energy that threatened to tear through reality itself. Orion flipped the thrusters in the opposite direction, a move that made no strategic sense, then reversed gravity plating mid-flight, forcing the filament to overshoot. He shouted to Threx, who manned the auxiliary systems, "Observe the pattern. I'm feeding it contradictions." Threx's mandibles twitched in astonishment. Humans, you actually think like that? Like you're crazy on purpose? Yes, Orion snapped, his focus unbroken. And you'll see why in a second. The Leviathan hesitated again, its pulses momentarily disordered. Orion's calculated chaos had disrupted its internal rhythm. The energy currents in the cockpit danced as if alive, matching the cadence of his thoughts. Every misstep, every unpredictable flicker of his emotions, translated into a harmonic spike that the entity could not compute. It was a mind built to absorb, and yet it recoiled from him. Orion adjusted course, angling the interceptor to align with a distant gravitational fault line, a region where space-time twisted and folded unnaturally. The Leviathan sensed it, moving to intercept, but the core pulsed faster, translating Orion's intent into resonant waves that bent space around him. The creature's massive form shimmered and quivered. It had never faced an opponent that could shape reality through thought alone. Cadet Hale, Vare warned again, you are exceeding all recommended thresholds. This is suicidal. I've never been good at following recommendations, Orion muttered, eyes locked on the warping void ahead. His mind dove into pure instinct, recalling memories that grounded him, his father's laughter, nights spent stargazing, and the stubbornness that had kept humans alive for millennia. The core absorbed these memories, converting them into a harmonically resonant field that pressed against the Leviathan like a tidal wave of possibility. The creature pulsed violently, attempting to absorb and adapt. It sent out filaments, sweeping arcs of destructive energy meant to neutralize anything in its path. Orion's ship shook, alarms wailing as hull integrity faltered. He fed the fear into the core, letting the energy convert to a stabilizing countercurrent. The vibrations of the interceptor resonated with his heartbeat, and for a brief instant, He felt an eerie synchronization with the Leviathan, its cognition brushing against his mind like a cold wind sliding beneath the skin. He could feel its instinct, not malice, but inevitability. "I know you're learning," Orion whispered, "but I'm unpredictable." He activated the paradox conduit, a subroutine embedded in the core to create feedback loops within the Leviathan's energy field. This was untested, unapproved, potentially fatal to him. But hesitation was not an option. The interceptor shook violently as the field expanded, sending ripples of distorted energy into the Leviathan. The entity writhed, each pulse now struggling to compensate for an input it could not compute. Orion could see the distortion in the light itself, the impossible geometry bending around him as if space refused to obey its own rules. Threx shouted from the auxiliary console, It's responding. The pattern. It's breaking down." Orion nodded grimly. Not breaking, adapting. But not fast enough. The Leviathan's form surged, opening a void-like maw that threatened to swallow the interceptor whole. Orion pushed the core to maximum output, flooding the field with all his conscious energy, weaving fear, anger, and determination into a harmonic storm. The pulse struck the creature at the exact moment it aligned with the gravitational fault line. Reality bent, shimmered, and then, for the first time, the Leviathan faltered. A roar echoed, not through space, but through the resonance of existence itself. The creature pulsed violently, shaking the very void around Orion, then recoiled. Its shape convulsed and shimmered as if struggling against something fundamental that defied its understanding. Orion felt the core pulse with him, syncing perfectly with his chaotic intent. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. Orion realized the Leviathan was not merely reacting to destruction, it was processing impossibility. His human mind, chaotic and unbounded, had become a weapon in itself. He didn't need to kill it. He just needed to force it to recognize something beyond its comprehension. "Hold steady," Orion told Threx. "This isn't over yet. I'm going in." The interceptor plunged toward the core of the Leviathan's pulse field, every sensor screaming, every alarm wailing. Orion's body and mind vibrated in perfect resonance with the core. The ship passed through the creature's outer distortions, entering a zone where space and time warped beyond definition. Energy filaments wrapped around them like living threads, but Orion's hands were steady, his mind singular. And in the silence of warped reality, Orion whispered, "Now let's see who you really are." The Leviathan quivered, a shudder that echoed across dimensions, and for the first time, Orion understood the next step. The battle was no longer about brute force. It was about human ingenuity, courage, and the refusal to accept the impossible. The journey into the creature's heart had begun. If you want, I can now write Section 4, the climax and HFY resolution, keeping the same intensity and male-only cast. Here's Section 4, under 1,000 words, completing the story with a clear climax, HFY resolution, and satisfying ending while keeping the male-only sci-fi cast. The void inside the Leviathan pulsed with a surreal energy, stretching Orion's senses to their limits. Space here had no direction. Time had no rhythm. Light twisted like liquid, bending around impossible geometries. The resonance core throbbed against Orion's chest, syncing perfectly with his heartbeat, amplifying not just his emotions, but the entirety of his chaotic human thought. Every fear, every memory, every ounce of stubborn determination fed into the device, converting ephemeral intent into tangible force. Beside him, Threx clutched the auxiliary controls, his mandibles trembling as the gravity of their situation hit him. "Cadet Hale, whatever you're doing, it's working. The Leviathan, it's reacting." Orion's gaze never wavered from the impossible patterns swirling around them. "It's not just reacting, Threx. It's learning. It recognizes logic and order, but not unpredictability. And humans were the purest form of chaos it's ever encountered." The Leviathan's internal structure shimmered violently, tendrils of distortion folding in on themselves as if reality itself were struggling to maintain cohesion. It pulsed, communicating in a language Orion could feel rather than hear, waves of instinct, intelligence, and cosmic inevitability. Every pulse sought to consume, to rewrite, to balance what it perceived as instability. But Orion's mind, fueled by defiance and intuition, was creating a resonance pattern beyond its capacity to process. "I need to push further," Orion murmured. "If I just disrupt it, it will adapt. I have to teach it." He activated the core's final subroutine, a paradox loop designed to create a self-contradictory pulse, a feedback cycle the Leviathan could not absorb. For a moment, the core glowed white-hot, and Orion felt his consciousness teeter on the edge of existence. Memories flickered, sensations doubled, and yet his resolve held firm. Only a human mind could embrace contradiction with total commitment. Only a human mind could survive being both the input and the output. The Leviathan recoiled, its form folding inward as the paradox pulse struck at its core. The space around Orion rippled violently, gravitational waves tugging at every molecule in his ship. Threx gripped the console, eyes wide. It's collapsing on itself. "Cadet, are you insane?" Orion gave a brief grin, teeth clenched.
"No.
"I'm human." He pushed the core to its limit, feeding every ounce of his intuition, anger, and hope into the pulse. The paradox began to reshape the Leviathan's very structure, forcing it into a pattern it could not reconcile. For the first time, it paused, not as predator, not as force, but as something almost alive in comprehension. "I see it," Threx whispered, almost reverently. "It's the paused. It's listening." Orion understood immediately. The Leviathan was not evil. It was a multiversal stabilizer, responding to imbalance with overwhelming force. Its destruction had always been a reaction to instability, not malice. Humans, he realized, were uniquely capable of creating intentional instability and unpredictability, the very thing the Leviathan could not adapt to. He made a choice. The core hummed violently as Orion directed the paradox pulse to fully penetrate the Leviathan's dimensional structure. The tendrils of distorted energy coiled, twisted, and then refracted into a stable, singular point, a seed of compressed energy, harmless but alive, a remnant of the entity capable of recalibration. The rift began to seal behind them, and the oppressive distortion lifted like a tide withdrawing from a shore. Threx exhaled, trembling. "Cadet, we did it. The station, the system, it's safe." Orion slumped back in his harness, exhausted, mind buzzing from the overwhelming resonance of the core. "Safe for now," he said quietly. "But the universe isn't going to wait for us to catch up. We've proven something today, something every species will have to respect." A crackling comm signal interrupted the silence. Commander Vare's voice came through, more solemn than Orion had ever heard. "Cadet Hale, the Council will not believe this. No weapon could stop it," they said. "But a human did." Orion let a small, satisfied smile cross his face. "No weapon, Commander. Just intuition. Chaos. Humanity." Vare paused. "Your species, perhaps it is more than we ever gave it credit for. I underestimated your stubbornness." Orion leaned back in the cockpit, watching the stars resume their normal patterns. The Leviathan no longer threatened the system. It existed now as a dormant anomaly, a seed of potential, waiting for balance. He knew it would return one day, but next time, humanity would face it on its own terms. Threx finally spoke, voice quieter than before, almost admiring. "Humans, you're insane. But maybe that's exactly why you survive." Orion's grin widened. "Exactly why we survive." The Interceptor's thrusters flared, carrying them away from the rift and back toward the Academy. The evacuation had been chaotic, but Orion and Threx had a story to tell, proof that when the universe decrees something impossible, humanity will find a way. Not with raw power, not with weapons designed to kill, but with courage, intuition, and an unyielding refusal to accept limits. And as the station grew closer, lights twinkling against the void, Orion whispered to himself, more to the universe than anyone listening, "Everything can be stopped, you just have to be human enough to do it." The resonance core hummed one last time, syncing perfectly with his heartbeat, and then went silent, leaving the cosmos a little less certain and humanity a little more unstoppable. If you want, I can now also create image prompts for each section. YouTube description. Thumbnail title. All in one HFY sci-fi style.